Hi, today we're going to be talking with our friends Adam and Cara Nitz, who have a marriage ministry called The Way for Love. We're going to be talking to them today about conflict in marriage. Stay tuned.
You don't want to miss it. You're listening to Marriage Mania, where we are audacious, sagacious, and tenacious for the Lord to uphold godly marriages and to raise fervent children who are countercultural and stand for biblical truth.
Hi, welcome back. I am Tanya.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to be talking with our friends Adam and Cara Nitz about conflict in marriage. But before we get started, please subscribe here. It really helps us to get the message out. We have such a strong passion for marriage and family, and we just want to be able to help as many families as possible. So let me introduce our friends. Adam and Cara have a marriage ministry called The Way for Love. Their ministry sprung out of the experiences of their own marriage, where in addition to the good times in their marriage, they also walked through some significant lows and spent time in counseling, getting coaching, learning from mentors, and reading tons of books to find healing and restoration. Now they want to share with others what they have learned, so they pour into others with their marriage coaching. And from their years of training and experience, they offer an 8-session course to enrich your marriage in whatever season you're in, healthy or less than healthy seasons. They have a workbook that goes along with each session to help you work on what is taught, and they offer coaching sessions. Cara has been a certified life coach for over 10 years, helping hundreds of women, and Adam has a master's degree in theology, is a Christian author. He wrote a book, 365 Days of Prayer, for fathers, and he wrote a Christian novel, and he is passionate about helping men. Together, they minister to marriages to work through issues and be healthy, all for God's kingdom. So let's introduce our friends, Adam and Cara. Hi, Cara and Adam. We're so excited to have you here today. Please introduce yourself to our audience. We're so excited.
Well, we're so excited to be here as well. I'm Adam Nitz, and this is my wife, Cara Nitz, and we are growing a marriage ministry as well.
We've been married for 18 years, and we have 5 kids. We have a homestead. We moved from Minnesota just a couple years ago, bought 33 acres of land, and built our house, built all these things for our animals, and now we just have 1 million animals as well.
Hopefully the dogs don't bark.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm sure you guys are super busy. And I just want to kind of share how we met. I don't know exactly how it came about, but I know, Cara, we were talking on Instagram, which, you know, that's been such a blessing and such a great tool that we've used for the kingdom of God. And just being able to connect with people like you and just learning more about marriage and just effective communications and all kinds of things that, you know, we run into different people. And I'm just so grateful that we were able to connect. So I'm excited that you guys are here to share about your ministry.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Adam and Cara, we just love your marriage course that you offer online. And for our listeners, in your course, you talk about the purpose of marriage, issues with the difference between men and women, issues with getting needs met, codependency, inner healing from past pain that can present itself in the marriage, sometimes without you realizing it. Mm-hmm. And you offer great insight into identifying and healing those triggers inside us that make us so upset. Your course talks about issues with sexual intimacy, conflict resolution, and then establishing a vision for healing and growth in your marriage. We love your workbook that helps couples go through this course, and you're trained and experienced coaches and offer coaching so that couples don't have to walk this journey of healing alone. Just, you know, thank you for all that you're doing for God's kingdom and helping marriages. And, you know, and today we want to talk about conflict in marriage, one of the topics in your course, and one of the major topics in every marriage.
Yes, for sure.
I know we have often said that if there's one area where we need to be experts in as a married couple, is in conflict resolution. And we often say that unhealthy conflict in marriage isn't caused so much by what we're arguing about as much as it is about how we go about discussing our disagreements or issues in the marriage, or ignoring issues altogether in the marriage. Talk to us about how healthy conflict can be good and how unhealthy conflict can be damaging. Let's start with how conflict can be healthy. That notion may seem odd to a lot of people. Healthy conflict? How can conflict be healthy and good for marriage? What does healthy and effective communication and healthy conflict look like?
Yeah, so I mean, healthy conflict can be so great because it can actually bring out issues that are kind of underlying or under the surface. It can bring out pain that might be hidden, and it can help you so much with growth in your marriage, right? We all know marriage is a journey of so much growth. It's growing together, it's growing personally, it's growing closer to God. And so healthy conflict, when it's done right with the goal of connecting at the end of it, that really helps with growth so much. So the difference is when you are practicing healthy conflict, it's intentional. It's not that kind of eruption that happens when emotions are kind of out of control and then you end up having like an impulsive conflict. This is more of that intentional conversation where you work through these things that are maybe under the surface, bringing them to light and helping to understand each other, understanding each other's perspective, maybe understanding the history. And that's the goal. The goal is always connection, whereas the unhealthy conflict, a lot of times it kind of turns into a debate, where it's one person against the other person. And that's not the goal of healthy conflict. And there's a totally different outcome when you come at it in an intentional way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because you definitely want to be intentional about addressing things, but you want to do it in a healthy way. So it doesn't ripple effect into more conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, I just love what everybody's saying. I mean, conflict is healthy if you're addressing issues in the marriage in a healthy way. You're not ignoring issues in the marriage, brushing them under the rug to fester and cause bigger problems later. You're attacking the problem, not each other. And we're gaining better understanding of each other in the process, and better closeness as we work out these issues, better understanding of how each of us thinks and what our needs are, and what, and you've informed me of your needs and given me a chance to address them. And through this process, we're talking kindly to each other and asking questions and listening to what the other person is saying to gain understanding of their position. We're living out Matthew 18, addressing issues with our brothers and sisters in Christ, not letting problems linger. And James 1:19, being slow to speak, quick to hear, slow to anger. That's when conflict is healthy. How can unhealthy conflict be damaging to the marriage? What is ineffective, unhealthy communication?
So I mean, unhealthy conflict, it's when you're coming to a conversation usually it starts because you're in big pain. Whereas in healthy conflict, you come to the conversation in peace. Maybe you are feeling strongly about whatever topic it is, but when you kind of feel those emotions, talk to God, release those things before you come to the conversation, that leads to healthier conflict. Whereas when you come to the conversation with this big pain and then it kind of explodes out to your partner, that's like that impulsiveness that we were talking about before. Oftentimes that leads to things like blame and accusation, shaming of our partner. Well, then they get defensive, right? And then it just kind of starts to escalate. And then it can turn into that, where what I was talking about with the whole debate. And, and so it just ends up escalating, and there can be a lot of new hurt now, a lot of new pain brought in. Whereas normally with the healthy conflict, the goal is to grow and connect. This ends up, usually you're both on opposite sides even more so, and there's even more pain. So not being able, one of the things that really contributes to the unhealthy conflict is not being able to express your emotions in a healthy way, and then not taking accountability
or
as
possibly
well.
not to even know what your emotions are. Like if you haven't identified your own emotions and they're just coming out of you in a flood, in a torrent, and you're ending up just kind of exploding all over the other person, that's not healthy either. So you absolutely need to know what you're feeling, kind of identify it, and then also be able to communicate it in a healthy way.
And take accountability.
I mean, that's interesting because it's that's something that you kind of have to learn, right? like I would, it would be hard for me, putting that into practice, which I think it's a good thing. Like, okay, I just got mad. Why?
Yeah.
Like to actually stop and think about that is something that a lot of people don't actually do because they're like, this is how I feel right now. And this is what's going to come out of me right now. And then usually, some people may like feel a little different afterwards. Like, man, I shouldn't have acted that way. Why did I act that way? And I guess also it's more self-control, really stopping and understanding why you feel that way, and then actually addressing the problem that you're feeling. So I think
to have a time to reset yourself and to take that break and to really, take a few minutes to really understand what's going on, and then be able to re-engage in a peaceful state.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people put that into practice.
Yeah.
I mean, I never was taught, so
Well, and that's the thing, is that a lot of us were not taught emotional awareness, and Adam and I weren't either. And I was taught more to like just stuff it down, or like, we don't care about your emotions, like you need to just do the thing or whatever, obey or whatever. But so as an adult, we sometimes have to learn these new skills, but this is so important for having a healthy marriage, because otherwise, and we've talked from experience here, we have had so much unhealthy conflict.
Sure.
And so it is, like Adam said, it is so important to, if needed, okay, maybe you did forget to come to the conversation in peace. And so you realize it is escalating. And that's where you get that chance to say, you know what, I just need a break. And then during that break, you start to, acknowledge, what am I feeling? And, releasing that to God and talking to him about it. He's a safe place. He can take our big pain, right? And then asking, where can I take accountability for this? So that when you come back to the conversation, you can take some accountability. You can apologize for where you've maybe, escalated it, where you brought in pain or where you brought in blame. And then the conversation can move forward in a healthier way.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one area where we need to be lifelong learners in is conflict resolution techniques, and examining how we're doing with conflict, and constantly learning and adjusting and learning our spouse and what sets them off, I said that in the wrong way, maybe I could have said that differently. And, most of the time, like Adam, like you said, we're just unloading our emotions on each other in an unhealthy way, and conflict is unhealthy when all we're doing is fighting each other by attacking each other. And Cara, like you said, we're just blaming, shaming, and exploding in anger. We're not listening to the other person. I'm just waiting for you to finish talking, or I'm even interrupting you so I can say what I want to say and convince you of my position and why I'm right and you're wrong. We're not treating each other nicely. We're bringing up the past. I'm bringing up other issues that you're messing up on. We're name calling. We're not trying to resolve anything. We're just venting. I like what y'all talked about with the 4 communication styles in your teaching. 3 unhealthy styles, and then the 1 healthy, the passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and assertive communication. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that contributes to conflict.
Sure, I think that's
resolution.
That's really part of understanding yourself, is how you communicate, especially in a conflict situation. And there are those 4 things like you just mentioned. There's the aggressive style, one of the unhealthy ones, obviously, where you're really at the base of that is I matter, but you don't. So you're kind of like steamrolling over the other person. It's all about me. It's not about them. And how can I get my way and force my way in the situation? And it turns into a lot of blame and argumentativeness and a fight. So the aggressive style often results in like, I'm going to fight because I'm right. And then the passive, there's passive is another unhealthy one. That's you matter, but I don't. So now I am just kind of like treat myself as a doormat. I've struggled with this over the years as kind of like this idea of like self-sacrifice is like this, huge virtue to have. Well, that can become a very passive way of communicating, because now it's all about the other person, it's not about me at all, and then you end up having a lot of resentment that builds inside of you because you're not really taking care of your own needs. And so you just let everything go the other person's way. Well, that's also unhealthy. And another one is passive aggressive, and that's kind of a mix of the two, which is a toxic cocktail, shall we say, where it's you matter, but not really. So you're like saying you matter to me, but under the surface is I'm resenting the fact that my needs aren't getting met, and I'm actually trying to manipulate you by showing up the way I'm showing up. I'm going to pretend, I'm going to sound nice, I'm going to say quote unquote the right things, but under the surface, I'm actually upset. I'm actually angry. I'm actually communicating in a way that is not truthful to how I actually am feel. And it's more of a manipulation with niceness. And you think of somebody who's like doing the dishes or something, and they don't want to do it, and the other person is like slamming the dishes around, like, yeah, I'll clean the dishes. They're just slamming dishes down on the cupboard because they don't want to actually do this thing, but they are saying the right things. And the hint, the quote hint is like, okay, well, I really want you to do the dishes. So they're trying to communicate, but it's actually in a very aggressive way under the surface. Mm-hmm. So that's passive aggressive. And then the one healthy one is assertive communication. And behind that is I matter and you matter. We both matter in this relationship. And how we communicate, we're going to communicate our clear inner truth, and we're going to do it in a healthy way. So that we're both powerful people in this relationship. We both have a say. We both know what we want and are speaking what we are feeling in a way that really is not aggressive or passive aggressive or passive, but we are actually communicating clearly and lovingly what we want and what we need in the relationship. So that would be an assertive way.
I like everything that you said, because we don't understand these things, especially if we're not. Well, I guess I probably should say, okay, those that are not believers may not understand how to communicate in a Christ-like way. And then those who are Christians may also be, I guess, working through fleshly, emotions. It's kind of like both sides dealing with trying to figure out how do we communicate with our spouse in a best way. Because I know, in our marriage, and maybe kind of what I'm trying to say here is, in our marriage, I know at the very beginning is usually the first couple years of marriage is when you're really trying to iron out how do we communicate. And we're both believers, but how do you communicate? We want Christ to be the center, but I'm still dealing with my flesh. I'm still dealing with how I feel. And, if you're not doing something that's, if it's upsetting me, then I react in a way that's not Christ-like. And I'm having to go back, and then thank God for the Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit's convicting me of it. But I think it's just working through, what you were saying earlier, is knowing your spouse and figuring out, our whole job is really understanding who is our spouse and how do they communicate? How do they receive information? How can we come together as a team to be able to come to the same conclusion? Or even if our decisions are different, how can we, compromise so there isn't this huge blow up or this big, conflict that we can't resolve together? Because I know there's been times that we've had to go to bed at night and we're not really angry, but we're just upset about the situation. But we're refreshed the next day where we're able to talk about it and address the problem.
Yes, and I really like you guys' focus on really living out the Philippians principle, that
Philippians 2.
Not only look out for your own not only look out for your own interests, but also the interests of the other. In other words, it's both. It's not just your desires, your needs, and I just give in on mine. And it's certainly not just my desires and my needs, and I just run roughshod over you. We weigh the two. We consider both. And then we meet each other and we talk it out, and we come to what works best for both of us, what works best for the marriage, and hopefully come to a win-win solution. And we're not being aggressive about it, running over the other person. We're not being passive about it by just not addressing anything at all. And we're certainly not being passive aggressive, where we're just kind of like hinting at an issue. I guess I'm going to be the only one carrying in the groceries here. It's like, what is that? Y'all gave that example.
I know.
And it's like, why don't you, that just seems kind of sideways and a little mean, why don't you just ask directly and kindly, hey, can you help me with the groceries? I know I was a little oblivious. I was like really intent on what I was doing at the moment. I can't always notice everything that's going on. We got to treat each other with a little grace and understanding in the process.
I asked you to bring those groceries in. I come in, I park, hey, the groceries are here.
Yeah, she was definitely very assertive. That's what I really love. I love about her. Right, I don't have to guess with her. If she needs something, she desires something, she's going to let me know. She gives me warning when we have like an anniversary or birthday going on. She's not going to just like wait and see if I'm gonna know. She's like she's very upfront, and that gives me confidence that there's nothing bothering her underneath that's simmering that she's not addressing. That I know that she's an open book. She's open and honest with me, and if she has some kind of issue and a problem, she's gonna let me know, and we are definitely going to talk it out. And she does come at me with kindness, and grace, and so that's just we love your emphasis on that in your teaching. It's not my way, it's not your way, it's our way, and everybody's opinions and desires matter in this situation.
And I think
you guys are so honest. I love that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that affects how we do show up. So maybe I am being passive aggressive, and I'm having a rough day and I'm being passive aggressive, and instead of necessarily judging myself or him judging me, we can look at like what's going on in her heart, or for myself, like what's going on in my heart? What is the wound there? Because when we see ourselves the way God sees us, when we see how much he loves us, that love spills out, right? But when we are feeling, unseen by God, or we're feeling lonely, or and this is not just by God, but in life in general. Maybe we're feeling unseen by our spouse, and we forget to get those needs met with God, then that hurt can come out. It might come out in our communication. It might come out in the conflict, right? So just that gentle reminder that you are so loved by God, and to come to him and ask him how he sees you, because he loves you so beautifully all the time, whereas our spouse doesn't always do that, right? And so if we look to them to get our needs met, and then that decides how we show up, how we communicate, that's going to be lacking a lot. That's going to fall short. But coming to God, and asking him, how do you see me and how are you meeting my needs? That can change everything, because he always shows up perfectly for us.
Yeah, the Lord is awesome to have that central. And I love that you emphasize that our spouse is not who brings us joy. Ultimately is Christ, and he brings us joy. But also he does give us our spouse so that we can live this life with joy, as Solomon talks about. And so I love that and that emphasis.
Yeah, and I really like how you emphasize how, we all come to the discussion with our own emotions. We show up with our own emotional baggage that's in the background, our own backgrounds that are never perfect. They're never going to be. We are all very busy. We have 1,000 hats that we do. We can never pay the proper amount of attention that we need to give to the other person's needs, and that's always going to cause some kind of emotions in the background, and we don't necessarily realize how that causes these triggers in us, and that And I like how you turn the table back instead of, hey, let me just focus on why the other person is doing all this wrong and making me angry, and turning it back and wait a minute. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has flaws. Why is it that their flaws are causing me to react this way? Why is my emotions building up in this situation? And in your teaching, I really loved your discussion on triggers and how they contribute to unhealthy conflict. Talk to us a little bit about that. First of all, what are triggers? And then how do triggers cause arguments, and how do we deal with them when we feel triggered?
Yeah, well, and I think you just said it really well. The reason why this is so important to talk about is because we can't heal our spouse. We can't control them and make them, well, what's his, what's going on with him today? Why is he acting like that? I wish he would just, whatever, right? So real life example, Adam struggles a lot with shame. And as much as I wish that I could just take that away, and just, put in God's love and just pour it in every day into his brain and just erase the lies from the enemy, there's deep wounds there for him. And he needs to do that healing on his own. Yeah, I can support him in that, but it's really between him and God. And then his shame, though, it might come out in a way that then triggers me. And so that's where I need to take responsibility for my triggers and what happens. So let's talk about trigger. Like, what is a trigger? A trigger is caused by either an internal thought or an external action from someone else. And it causes this reaction that makes a painful incident from the past kind of feel as if it's happening right now. And so the part of your brain, the limbic system, it's wired to keep us safe. And so a trigger makes you feel anxious, and it brings up, emotion, because it's setting your limbic system is setting off an alarm saying, like, this isn't right. Something is going wrong, or you're not safe right now.
It's almost like your emotional state takes over. It kind of takes over. Your brain goes into like neutral, and your emotional state kind of takes over. Like you have the example of like veterans of war who have like maybe a firework goes off and it brings them right back to that place where they were in war and there's bullets flying, and so they logically they may know that I'm not in that situation, but the emotions have kind of taken over and hijacked the brain to thinking that you're in this other state, and you're just stuck in that from being triggered by whatever event it was that triggered you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's not just, I think it's easy for sometimes people to believe that a trigger can only happen to someone who had maybe like
Right.
PTSD.
And that's more of an extreme example.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, there's little things that trigger much smaller, but still reactions that are big to you.
Yeah, right. It just because it wasn't, an actual trauma, like you were in war, doesn't mean it doesn't still do the same thing in your brain. Mm-hmm. And so that's why listening to your body and noticing, there's four different reactions that people might have when they feel triggered. So there's the fight response, which is where you might just kind of go into this blow up mode, or you're lashing out, you're blaming. I know that one has happened for me before. You feel like you maybe need to protect yourself. Like, okay, I'm not safe. And so you go into fight mode. Like, I'm going to keep myself safe at all costs. Right. And then there is the flight. And this one is where you might either physically leave. You might, if you're in a conflict maybe and your spouse says something that triggers you,
walk out and slam the door.
Or you might check out, emotionally or mentally. So sometimes I'm not proud of this, but I will literally pick up a book and start reading it. And he's talking.
And I'm talking, and she's reading a book, and it flares up more for me because I'm like, what? You're not even listening to me now. Yeah. But she's in that response. So she's in flight. She's checking out. She's mentally going somewhere else instead of physically going somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a way to kind of protect yourself. And then the third one is freeze. So you might just completely just stop talking, almost like you're a statue. You don't respond. You kind of numb yourself out, and you're just kind of stuck in this statue kind of mode.
Yeah, it's almost like if you do nothing, maybe it'll go away. And that doesn't really work either.
Right. And then the fourth one is fawn, where you try to take care of them, maybe to make it go away, or to make the situation seem safe.
It's like if they're okay, then I'll be okay. So I'm going to do whatever I can to make them okay, so that then I can feel okay again. And so that's the fawn response.
Mm-hmm. And they're all not something that you need to judge yourself for, but something just to help you say, oh, I'm noticing what I'm doing right now. Like if I pick up a book, I'm like, uh-oh, I am in flight right now. I must be triggered by something, right? And so I can realize, okay, I need to put the book down. I need to maybe take a break, or maybe if I feel safe enough, I can share what's going on in my heart with him. But sometimes you don't, and you have to just take a break from it and process those emotions yourself.
And how do we do that? What do you do exactly when you feel that trigger? Tell us a little bit about that 5-step process.
I think a lot of times you do need to communicate that need for a break. And you have to be clear about that. Like, I'm feeling a certain way right now. Maybe I'm triggered right now. You could even say those words and say, I need to take a break. It'll be 10 minutes. And then I'll come back. Something specific too, so that your spouse isn't just left hanging, not knowing when you're going to come back. And then you go off by yourself, and that's another time where you're really identifying those emotions. Like, what's going on inside? You do like a check and even pray it out to God. Like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What is coming up for me? Asking God into that and say, give me some insight here and help me to understand where I'm at and why I'm feeling this way. And then it's good to identify those emotions, to really name them as they come out, to actually give them a name and understand what they are. And then to give those to God. Just say, I'm feeling this. And you can pray that out to God. Just unload your burden, cast all your anxiety on him, for he cares for you. And that doesn't just mean anxiety, but any other emotions that you're maybe feeling in that moment. You're casting them on him, and he's going to take that burden from you. And then you also offer yourself love and compassion, because that's also important.
Well, what you can do too, so when you're feeling that emotion, we have like 5 steps to, because what really you need to do is to see what is the trauma, what is the unhealed trauma that is going on inside of you that is causing the trigger. Because it's not really that maybe because he left the room when we were in the middle of a discussion, that triggered me then. And so it's not really him. I can't really blame him necessarily, although that's not necessarily a healthy response.
That would not be.
But I can't blame him for my trigger. I have to go back to like, okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling abandoned. Okay, when did I feel abandoned at another time? And then go back to what is that trauma that happened? Because when we were little, a lot of times it goes back to when we were little. And it's not that our parents were bad parents. It's just that nobody's perfect. And so they can't perfectly meet all of our needs. Only God can. And so when we are little and we're dependent upon our parents to meet every need, right? You're just a helpless baby, or you're just a little child, and they can't do that perfectly, then those needs didn't get met. And so I might have felt abandoned as a child. And that's what's being triggered, is that like, oh my goodness, my person that I love and that I need right now, they just left me. And so we have to go back to that unhealed trauma. And that's like where Adam was talking about, offering yourself love and seeing yourself in that moment and how you were feeling. And we have a whole 5-step process to inner healing. But one thing I like to do right away when you notice you're triggered, I like to help my clients, really practice this. Sometimes even when we're together, and they might be triggered even, because a trigger, it's not necessarily just a momentary thing. It could last days. You could stay in a triggered state for days. And so just to put your hand on your heart, kind of get connect with your body a little bit, take a deep breath, and then let your body know we're safe. Like I'm safe. Everything's okay, or I'm not in danger right now. Because remember, that trigger is really your limbic system telling you, no, we're not safe. Something is not right. And so just letting yourself know, no, I am safe, and I think that can really help to then get to a more logical part of your brain. Once your limbic system knows, oh, okay, I am safe, then you can start to access the logical part of your brain, and you can start to think through this, and then you can revisit, and then you can start to heal that past trauma.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Yes, I really liked your teaching on triggers. I found it especially insightful and helpful to identify what triggers us, that it's not all about the other person making me angry, but looking at, why does this person make me so upset? Is there something in me that I need to deal with? And I love your advice for dealing with it. Like when a big emotion comes upon us, maybe in private, this is not in front of the other person, but, allow ourselves to feel the emotion, name the emotion like you talked about, examine it. What does this emotion remind me of? Perhaps it's something in the past. Validate the feeling as being okay. I like how you say that in your teaching that God gave us emotions as a warning signal, like our car gives us a warning signal that something's not right. Our emotions give us a warning signal that something's not right, and not to ignore it. Deal with it. Let it happen in the moment so I can examine it and get at the root of it. I'm upset right now. I'm sitting here fuming because my spouse is late, but instead of letting them have it when they get home, let me ask myself, why am I getting so upset at my spouse having to work late? This may be an offense, but it doesn't have to affect me to this degree.
Right.
Is there something in my past that's being triggered? I felt this way when my parents left me. Am I getting upset at my spouse working late because of feelings of abandonment that are rooted in times where I felt my parents were distant and unengaged, and that has caused a fear of abandonment that causes a trigger in me when my spouse is late or works a lot and is not with me, so I blow up at them. I just loved your discussion of examining our emotions. We give voice and validation to our emotions, but we don't just let them fly out at our spouse uninhibited and unexamined. It's living out Ephesians 4:26, like you talked about. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Our emotions are not a sin. God gave us those. What we do with our emotions can be a sin if we don't examine them and guide them to be fruitful and not destructive.
I think that's a great point, and it just brings back, at the beginning. And I'll just share this quick example at the beginning of our marriage. When we had our first argument, I felt that way of abandonment because my father wasn't around, right? So I grew up as my mom was a single parent. And so I felt like, okay, every relationship is always like everybody leaves. So, then you start to think about those things. But, we had made that covenant between the Lord, knowing that we are married, and just because we have disagreements, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. And so I came to that conclusion knowing that, we're on the same team, he loves me, I love him, and we just have to work through this conflict. No one's leaving anybody. We we are on this journey of marriage because the Lord brought us together. And so we're going to work through it together. And I related to what you said, going back to past things. We've been married for 11 years now, but that first year was really understanding, how do I communicate and why do I feel this way? But it wasn't something that I learned. It was just like, okay, obviously I'm upset because I know my father left, and, I feel like every relationship is, they leave. And so now I'm feeling like, okay, he's going to leave, And so I think just going through that experience, everything that I learned from your teaching, it really brought back that to my mind of wow, I guess I was having that same feeling back then, and not really realizing it was a trigger or just an emotion from the past. So I think that's really good. And it's something that again, we don't put into practice. And I feel more confident now because we have, we know each other and we are able to talk through our conflict in a healthy way. But, back then I didn't. And I think that's something that, even couples that are just newly married need to understand that they have to work through those situations.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, triggers are easier to see in other people than they are in ourselves.
Yeah.
Unless we really make
Yeah.
a concerted effort to
Yeah.
examine ourselves, which most people aren't doing. I mean, that's that's a hard thing to do. And, it reminded me, like Tanya was saying earlier on in our marriage, there was times where we would have arguments and I could feel my emotions building up. And, I'm a processor. I got to process these emotions. I got to process what I'm feeling. I got to process my response because my response in the moment, everything going in my head, all my thoughts in my head are not good. And I know in my mind, I better not say anything that's in my mind right now. So I need to sit on this for a moment. And I told her, look, I got to process this. Can we talk about this in the morning? And what I saw in her face and in her words and in her emotions was panic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was like,
what is wrong with you,
what just happened? It was that seemed a little much of a response. But we can help with other people's triggers as well, because we were new. She didn't know what I would do. I think she had this fear that this problem would never get addressed. I'm just trying to ignore the problem. But it's like, no, I want to process it and talk about it in the morning. And then when she saw in the morning, when I came back on my own initiative to say, can we talk about this right now? And we came at it in a calm way, start off with an apology, start off with a good startup, that just sets the tone, that we want to have a conversation. We're not just yelling and venting at each other, but let's talk about the issue in a calm way. The emotions have calmed down. We've examined our emotions. We examined our thoughts. We've processed our thoughts, and let's talk about it. And she could see me doing that. I could see the comfort coming to her that, okay, I could see the trigger that she had. Let me work with that a little bit. Let me give her confidence that I'm going to come back in the morning after I've processed this and talk it out in a calm way. And she's like, okay, I can relax now. When he says I want to think about this, he's going to think about it, and he's going to come back and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So that's how I just found your trigger lesson just very, very insightful, and it can really contribute to a lot of arguments. And if we have insight into our triggers, it can really help us in navigating the issues that we have in marriage.
Newlyweds for sure.
And as you work through these triggers, it really increases your bond with each other and your understanding of each other, because you get to, instead of just seeing, okay, there's this crazy reaction here, now you're actually digging down into the surface, under the surface of that, and why is that, and who is this person, and why are they showing up this way? And as you dig into that more and more, your bond between each other grows stronger, and your connection gets all the more, better, because you're dealing with these things and talking through them.
Yes. Well, Adam and Cara, there's so much more that we could talk about, and there's so much more in your online class and your workbook, and we direct our listeners to that. And I love that people can get personalized coaching from you to help with their specific issues, to help walk them through it. They don't have to go through this alone. Just thank you for serving the Lord and helping couples. God wants our marriages to be healthy so that we can do powerful things for the kingdom together and disciple our children in the Lord together, united and strong. Just thank you for ministering to the Lord and to marriages.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And we would love for you to tell our listeners where they can find you, about your course, and anything else that you want them to hear.
Yeah. So our course and our coaching and more information about us is all found at our website, thewayforlove.com. You can also find me on Instagram. You can find Adam on Instagram. Adam is at Faithful Masculinity, and I am just at Cara Nitz. And we have so much to offer. We have some free guides for wives, free guides for husbands, and you can find that all on our social media as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'll be sure to put that in the notes so that people can reach out to you and connect with you to be able to at least, get connected with trying to figure out their conflicts in marriage, or even just learning more about healthy conflict. So, Karen, Adam, we are so grateful to have you here today, to be able to share with everyone. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Hey, that was a great conversation with our friends Cara and Adam Nitz, and just talking about how to deal with conflict, healthy conflict, and to address conflict that's just out of control, and really looking at our emotions and really focusing on the Lord as well, like putting the Lord first in our marriages so that God can help us with his strength to be able to overcome any of those reactions that we may have in marriage.
Yes, and it's helpful to think about the fact that conflict isn't bad.
Right.
It's inevitable in every marriage. You're going to have areas where you don't agree. The question is, how are you handling the conflict? Are you handling it in a helpful way or an unhealthy manner? And we need to think of conflict as an act of intimacy. The closeness and oneness that we have in a marriage is where we learn to communicate our desires and work together to meet each other's needs. We learn how to listen to one another and respect our different points of view and opinions. This is where we learn how our spouses think very differently and has a very different worldview, and we learn how to navigate those differences. Resolution of our differences helps us operate more and more as one. And when we say and do things that are wrong, our apologies and forgiveness bring a reconciliation and healing that reinforces our marital bonds. Conflict brings marriages closer if it's done right, but conflict will tear a marriage apart when it's done wrong. So it's so important that we do it right and never stop learning how to do it better, and learning our spouse, constantly learning our spouse, asking questions, learning the other person's opinions and their point of view and how do they come to their conclusions. Don't just use conflict as a way to, let me just vent my emotions and try to convince you of why I'm right and you're wrong. No, this is an opportunity to learn our spouse and ask questions about what they're thinking and why do they think that way. And when we learn each other more, we come closer together, we're more intimate, and it's amazing how solutions can present themselves when we have better understanding of our spouse instead of just understanding myself and venting my feelings and venting my point of view to convince you why I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And, we are to have that healthy conflict because we're two sinners trying
saved by grace.
Saved by grace. Yeah. Saved by the blood of Jesus. And, we are to work together. We're a team, in marriage, your spouse is not against you. We're trying to learn how to work and walk in this life together. And that's the main thing. And understanding how to do conflict the best way instead of doing it in a way that does break down the heart and causes stress, and you just feel like this isn't where you want to be, and then you get these seeds of doubt. But just learning healthy conflict is good, and also instilling healthy habits of gratitude. We talk a lot about that in our podcast. Healthy habits of just appreciation, appreciating one another, going out on dates, doing things that really help the marriage. And healthy conflict is one of them, is talking through them, communicating, and sharing what is on each other's hearts and minds so that you can work together and compromise. It is about compromising. So I'm just so grateful that we were able to have this conversation with Cara and Adam Nitz, and just so grateful to learn from them and their experience in their own marriage. So we are so thankful, and please join us as we have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday where we talk about marriage and family. We talk about discipleship. We talk about marriage conflict. We talk about all kinds of things that really help bring Christ in the marriage and in our families. We want to raise up the next generation to know Jesus Christ. So please join us, give us a thumbs up, and until next time.
God bless.